Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of TNTT, Truth Not Trash with Tim. Make sure you go out and find it and look for it and watch all these episodes. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that is, boy, I would imagine on the minds of just about every um, voting American, at least, and probably lots and lots of Americans who didn't vote but want to complain anyway. Um, Subject. We're going to talk about Article 2 of the Constitution. And Article 2 really just pertains to the executive branch. Something that people don't realize, and I'm going to be real quick with the intros to these things because Article 2 is not nearly as long as Article 1, but Article 2, Section 1, which I want to cover in one entire episode, is a little lengthy. So we want to be able to get to all that tonight. But I want you guys to hear this. So this is interesting. Once again, I just go back to the history books and the different things, and I try to glean what I can. But I didn't realize this until the last few years when I really started to pay better attention. Under the three-branch federal government, which boasted the checks and balances for which the Federalists are highly famous, Article 2, which is what we're talking about, created a first ever American national executive, and he's called the President of the United States, elected indirectly by an electoral college, which is a shield against direct democracy and the dominion of large population centers. So there's stuff to unpack there. I don't know if we'll unpack this particular portion in this, but it's definitely something you guys can think about, right? So it's talking about the electoral college, and Article 2 is going to talk about that. President was to serve a 4-year term. At that point in time, when they wrote the Constitution, there was no term limit. It says he could be elected to perpetual terms. Had authority to appoint executive, or had authority to appoint diplomats and things of that nature. Of course, with the consent of the Senate. So, wow, lots of stuff to think about there. But yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So, like always, you know me, I like to get into this and set the mood a little bit. So what we're going to do is I am going to bring up a quick video, and I just closed it by accident. I apologize. Very something really to think about. It's pretty good stuff. And once again, you know me, I like to set the mood on things. So here we go.
The President of the United States is often described as the most powerful person in the world. The person who occupies the Oval Office represents a population of more than 320 million people and oversees the world's largest economy. As Commander-in-Chief, the President commands all 5 branches of the U.S. Armed Forces and a military budget that tops $580 billion annually. The President decides where troops are stationed, where ships are sent, and how weapons will be used. 886 generals and admirals take their orders from the President, along with some 1.4 million active frontline military personnel and 1.1 million active reserves. The President is the only person who can access the secret codes necessary to launch a nuclear attack, and is effectively responsible for more than 4,500 active and inactive nuclear warheads in the U.S. arsenal. The U.S. gives nearly $50 billion in foreign aid to more than 180 countries around the world. That's the President's job as well. The U.S. has collective defense agreements with 54 nations and legally conducts surveillance in 193 countries. The President has the power to veto laws passed by Congress and can pardon anyone of any federal crime, except impeachment. The President can designate land for national monuments and parks and appoints cabinet members, diplomats, and federal judges, all the way up to the Supreme Court. You might think the President's job is the most important job in the world, but it's not. The most important job is deciding who holds all that power. The most important job is yours. Make history. Vote.
So yeah, pretty cool, huh? Let me get over here and stop this real quick.
President is an expensive business.
And we'll escape out of that. But what we have going on here is just like the History Channel little clip there said, the most important thing we can do as the people and the population of the United States is vote. And that in itself, if that's the most important thing we can do, then I think the second most important thing that can happen based on that vote is that we know that our votes count, that our votes aren't overridden by fictitious votes or well, I can't say the VF word or I'll get challenged on YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about. So this is where we're at today. This is definitely where we're at today. And so what I need to figure out is how I feel about this whole thing. And that's what you guys need to do as well. And that's why I think it's important that we learn about the Constitution. And so let's get into it a little bit. All right, so we are talking about Article 2. We decided that's the executive branch because that's what it says. So I'm going to read it. We're going to go at it. Let me see. I think I have, let's see. I think I have the interactive Constitution up. There you go. Well, if my internet works, right? I think I mentioned to you guys before that my internet is not the fastest thing in the world. All right, Section 1. Let's just go right at it. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. Self-explanatory, right? The unique thing is that we're the first country to do that. And so pretty important. I don't know if you can hear the jets flying over right now. I'm out by NAS Whidbey. And they've decided to fly tonight, which is fine with me. The sound of freedom, in my opinion. I love it. All right. Second paragraph. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and together with the vice president chosen for the same term, be elected as follows. Okay, so we don't need to break up that paragraph, but you understand it's a 4-year term, and the vice president comes with it. Now, remember, in the beginning, there was no term limits. So a person could be president, be president, be president, be president. And that changed with one of the amendments. When we get to the amendments, we'll talk about that. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. Now it's getting interesting. Equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. But no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed as an elector. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. What it's saying is that when you take a state and you add together how many congressmen and senators there are, I'm going to use Washington State because that's what I'm familiar with, right? That's where I live. So that adds up to 12. So we have 10 congressmen, 2 senators. So we have to elect 12 electors. Now, how the state of Washington does it is they elect 12 Democrat electors, 12 Republican electors, and whoever wins the popular vote, traditionally, in the way it should work, is that they send those electors, that group of electors, the Democrats or the Republicans. So I'm somewhat familiar with this as I was voted as one of the 12 Republican electors for the state of Washington this last time around in 2020. So if Trump would have pulled off that miracle Washington win, I would have voted for Donald J. Trump in the Electoral College. So that's how that works. It also says that you cannot already be an office holder. It talks about a person of trust or profit under the United States. Those people can't be appointed as electors. Okay, so that is who the electors are. Now we're going to talk about the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for 2 persons, of whom one at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. And they shall make a list of all the persons voted for and of the number of votes for each, which list they shall sign and certify and transmit sealed to the seat of the government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. So I am going to stop right there for a second. Because we're not going to be able to break out this entire paragraph in one whole section. We're going to have to divide this out a little bit. So it says the electors shall meet in their respective states. So the Washington state electors are going to meet in Washington. I'm going to continue to use Washington as my example because that's where I live. They're going to make a list of the people that they're voting for, right? So there's a list of people that can possibly be voted for. And they shall make a list of the persons voted for and of the number of votes for each. They're going to sign the list. In this case, Washington State voted for Joe Biden. You know, I won't say my opinion on that, boo, but they voted for Joe Biden. So the 12 electors cast their ballots and voted for Joe Biden, and then they sealed it and they sent it to the government of the United States, to the president of the Senate. In this case, the president of the Senate is the vice president of the United States. Always has been, always will be, unless we have a constitutional amendment, or unless, we'll talk about this in another section, unless the vice president of the United States is not available, and then it goes to the president pro tem, which hold down a rabbit hole. But if we ever have to talk about that, we will. So they send it over there, and then that president has to open those ballots and officially count them in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Okay, so let's continue on. We don't know how far we'll get before I decide to stop again. The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president. Simple enough. If such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if there be more than one who have such majority and have an equal number of votes, then the House of Representatives shall immediately choose by ballot one of them for president. And if no person have a majority, then from the 5 highest on the list, the said House shall in like manner choose the president. But in choosing the president, the votes shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to highlight that section, and we're going to break it down a little bit. So the person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president. Yeah, that makes sense, right? That's how this whole thing works. But if 2 people have the equal amount of votes and a majority, then it has to go to the House for an immediate vote. And what it's talking about here is how they do this, or if neither person or no people have a majority, it goes to the House for an immediate vote. So these are some of the things that we're looking at right now. I don't know how all this is going to pan out. I know how I feel about it. How I feel is irrelevant to this conversation because we're talking about the Constitution. But so if no president is elected in this electoral college, in all these electoral votes that came in from the states, then it says the House is going to choose that president. And with that being said, it's done by states, and there's 1 vote per state. Now, a lot of this stuff was changed in the amendments. So once again, we're talking about the original Constitution right now. That's where we're at. In this case, most of this remains the same, except for it doesn't talk about 5 people and things of that nature. Okay, so we'll keep going on. Oh, and it also talks about how there has to be a quorum of states represented, which means just the majority of states. All right. And it says, in every case, after the choice of the president, the person having the greatest number of votes of the electors shall be the vice president. So the way it used to get chose before the amendment was that they voted on them separately, president, vice president. So you could have a president from one side and a vice president from the other. So that was unique back then. I don't necessarily think that was a terrible thing. I don't know how that would work out today. So in every case, after the choice of the president, the person having the greatest number of votes of the electors shall be the vice president. But if there should remain 2 or more who have equal votes, then the Senate shall choose from them by ballot the vice president. So what it's saying is the House chooses the president, Senate chooses the vice president. So that's the way it was in the original Constitution. Let's continue on. The Congress may determine the time of choosing the electors and the day on which they shall give their votes, which day shall be the same throughout the United States. So I made some notes here. And I said date of the electoral vote. So in this case, the 6th, which is tomorrow, isn't it? No, 2 days from now. Sorry, I work nights and I never know what day it is. The 6th is that date, the 6th of January. And that is when the vice president or the president of the Senate, right? He's not the vice president at that point in time. He's the president of the Senate. He's going to open up those ballots and make that count and then make it official. So whatever happens tomorrow is what happens. Is there a possibility of maybe court challenges and things after that? Sure, there is. I mean, we've had elections that went on all the way. I think there was one that went on till March. I'd have to check the history books and find that, but that was back in the 1800s. So, so the 6th, that's the day. That's the day that the electors are counted. All right, let's continue on. No person except a natural-born citizen or citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of the Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. So this goes back to when the Constitution was first written. There's a possibility there that somebody hadn't been a resident of the United States long enough to become president, right? Because the country was young. We were a country prior to this Constitution. Remember, we talked about that in the very first opening video about the Articles of Confederation and how we operated as a country under those articles until the Constitution replaced it. It says that you'll be a citizen, natural-born citizen. So born in the United States of American parents is the way I read that. Exceptions might be born on a military base overseas to military parents that are American citizens. So that's important stuff to remember. Now, this stuff gets so diluted over the years, and every side has their opinions and what they feel should be this or what they feel should be that. I just think that it doesn't have to be as difficult as we make it out to be. We read the Constitution and we perform as the Constitution is written, and we won't have these problems. Okay, shall be 35 years old. We talked about that. No need to beat this paragraph up any longer. All right, let's talk about this guy. In case of the removal of the president from office, now we're talking about succession, right? So what happens if something happens to the president? So it's already in place. I don't know why we were having this big argument with Miss Pelosi. I use that term lightly. In case of the removal of the president from office or of his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of the said office, the same shall devolve on the vice president. So the vice president becomes the president. And the Congress may, by law, provide for the case of removal, death, resignation, or inability, both of the president and vice president, declaring what officer shall then act as president. And such officer shall act accordingly until the disability be removed or a president shall be elected. Okay, so what it says is something happens to the president, the vice president takes over. And if something happens to the president and the vice president, then it's up to the Congress to figure out who takes over. In that case, it would probably be the Speaker of the House. Wow. Wouldn't that be just a crazy turn of events? We'll just leave it at that. Until the disability is removed, either the president or vice president are able to perform their duties again, if it was an illness or an absentee type thing, or until we elect a new president. Okay, so that's the succession. Now, once again, people want to make a lot more out of it than it has to be. There is an entire succession of duties that is written out. You can go find it, but the Constitution doesn't go much further than that. It does, though, somewhere down the road, I want to say one of the amendments talk about it a little further. So when we get there, we'll get there. All right, the president shall at stated times receive for his services a compensation which shall neither be increased nor diminished during the period of which he shall have been elected, and he shall not receive within that period any other emolument from the United States or any of them. So when you hear about the emolument clause, I think this is what it's referring to. I'm pretty sure it is. And how the president's not supposed to profit off being the president. Now, we all know that's a bunch of BS, right? Just like the congressmen and senators aren't supposed to profit off of being congressmen and senators. They go in at my level of wealth, which isn't great, I might add. It's not terrible. I've worked hard my whole life. But a few short years later, all of a sudden they're millionaires and then multimillionaires, and then their kids are working for large corporations that they had. All right, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'm going to stop right now. It just says that the president's going to get paid for his job. And that's what it says. Okay, continuing on. Before he enter the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. As a military guy, I've taken my share of oaths and affirmations, and I hold that to be one of the most important things I've ever done in my life. One of the biggest promises I've ever made in my life, like that of the vow of marriage. Unfortunately, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but man, that's kind of went south as well in the modern age. But a man makes a promise, a man keeps a promise, or a woman for that matter. When I say man, I'm talking about mankind, people. We make a promise, we keep a promise. And that's the way it should be. And if you're not willing to keep a promise, don't make the damn thing to begin with. But here it is. This is the president. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Pretty short, pretty simple. But that's his entire job, is to defend the Constitution of the United States, to make sure that what the Constitution says is how our government acts. I mean, that really is the basis of his job. Now, are there other things he needs to do? Yeah, look at the video. He's the commander-in-chief of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, things of that nature. We're going to talk about that in Section 2, some of his other duties. But this oath or affirmation is the bedrock of his responsibilities. And then the Constitution is the bedrock of our entire government and of this oath, and of the oath that I took as a military man, or that other people take as public servants. And we need to continue to do that. So lots of cool stuff there. Section 2, let's look at it, isn't extremely long, and we're at 23 minutes. So we can get into that a little bit. So Section 2. The president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and the Navy, we just talked about it, of the United States, and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices, and he shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. So the little video talked about that a little bit. We know he's the commander-in-chief of the military and the armed services. If the militias, i.e. National Guards or local militias, are called up to defend our nation, they in turn fall into command underneath the President of the United States. He can talk to his appointed officials, the Chief of Staff, the Department of the Navy, the CNO, all these people that he's appointed are officers that he can require an opinion from based on decisions he has to make, and their respective duties. I mean, he's not going to call the Department of Health about a defense-related issue, right? Unless it's biological, maybe. Sound like something we might be going through right now, right? All right, so he can also grant reprieves, pardons, again, for offenses that were against the United States. He cannot pardon an impeachment. That's specifically forbidden here. But he can pardon as many people as he wants. it's kind of ironic, people always complain at the end of a presidency about all the people this president's pardoning and letting go and so on and so forth. And you can kind of look at the people and the crimes that were pardoned under each president and kind of get a glimpse of what their mindset as a person is as president. All right, continuing on. He shall have the power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, remember, advice and consent of the Senate, to make treaties, provide 2/3 of the senators present concur. And he shall nominate and by with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and councils, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. But the Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the president alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. So basically what it's saying is when the president wants to appoint somebody, the Senate has to approve it, right? By consent of the Senate. Talks about treaties. So once again, this is an opinion thing. We got into some treaties under the Obama administration that were never approved or through the consent of the Senate. And but it seems like our Congress doesn't have the balls to stand up and say, wait a minute, we did not consent to that. That is not a treaty that we're getting involved in. And the president was able to do that on his own. And it's almost embarrassing. The Congress needs to stand up and be responsible for what they're supposed to be responsible for. And I'm talking the Senate specifically in this case. All right. Let's say, it talks about the Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers. So they could say, hey, okay, as far as these departments over there, they're not as important as those departments. So we're going to pass a bill, a law, a rule saying that we don't need to vet those people. You, as the president, can just appoint them as necessary. But they can always take that back somewhere down the road, right? And in some cases, I think they should. All right, and then at the end, last part of this section, the president shall have power to fill up all vacancies that may happen during the recess of the Senate by granting commissions which shall expire at the end of their next session. Okay, so remember we've had this happened under Obama, it happened under Bush, it happened under Trump, where a seat was vacated while the Senate was out of session. That president put the person that they thought was best in place. Of course, the media blows it all up. If it was on the left, the media loves that person and it's their darling, and everybody's okay with it. If it was a right-leaning president or a conservative president, all of a sudden he's the enemy of the state because he appointed somebody without the consent of the Senate. But the Senate can come back when they get back in session and vet that person and say yay or nay. So once again, that's just the way this thing works. Section 3, we're going to keep going. We're going to try and finish this. You can see we're almost done. Section 3, he shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the State of the Union. Sound familiar? State of the Union address, right? And recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. In other words, he can say, hey, Congress, I really think we need to work on this particular issue. Please take it up and come up with a solution and get back to me. He may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or either of them, and in case of disagreement between them with respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. He shall receive ambassadors and other public ministers. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed and shall commission all the officers of the United States. Okay, so we already broke down the very first part. He shall from time to time give the Congress information. So he can say, hey, these are some issues. Immigration, right? President Trump had to take immigration action because the Congress wouldn't take it up. They wouldn't fix anything. But the Congress could. The Congress could take it back and say, okay, we're going to do this, and then send it to the president. I'm just using that as an example. He may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or one or the other house. So he could say, hey, I want both houses in session right now. We're going to talk this out and figure this out. I don't know why that doesn't happen. I was extremely disappointed with my visit to Capitol Hill a few years ago. That was one of the reasons I decided to get into politics. Uh, I watched a couple sessions of Congress, and there was one congressman standing in an empty hall with some college age or high school age students running notes back and forth, and a president pro temp or a speaker pro temp sitting up there, and he was debating with himself. There was no debate there. And then they would run off and deliver to all the other congressmen that might want to be involved. It's not like what you picture. It's not like you don't see 400 congressmen in there debating over an issue. Very, very rarely does that happen, and that's unfortunate. That's our government has really degraded at that point in time. All right, so but the president could fix that. He could say, "You guys are going to be there, and we're going to debate this." At time, he's the face of the nation, right? He's going to receive ambassadors and ministers and kings and presidents and all these other people. He's the face of the nation. Um, he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed, right? That's where it comes into the executive branch is in charge of executing the laws, making sure the laws are put in place, not necessarily put in place, but are held. And I'm trying to find a good term, but you know where I'm going with that. He's put in place to make sure that we follow the law. And if we don't, we're punished accordingly. And not just us, I'm saying in general. And any commissions officers of the United States. So the military stuff. Okay. Section 4. And I'm not going to highlight it because you guys can see it there. The president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, we just went through that, right? I mean, okay, I'm going to give you my opinion. It was a freaking joke, and it was the top of my list. Yes, I got involved in politics because of the disaster of our congressional government, the way it was working. But the reason I ran for office really came back to this. I could not believe they were going to do this. They had nothing, and they were pushing it forward for purely partisan reasons. But now, well, I won't get into that. Let's just say that treason and bribery are top-notch things to get impeached for. And here we have some of that stuff going on with our theoretical president-elect, and yet we're just sitting back and letting it happen. Okay, so I was getting off in a rabbit hole. I need to stop. That is our section or Article 2, the executive branch. I hope you got something out of it. At a minimum, I sure hope that you revisit it, read it for yourself, look some things up, check the history of things. It's up to you to gain the knowledge. And we've all heard knowledge is power, right? Well, it truly is. And then it's up to us to make sure that we exercise our rights as citizens of the United States under the Constitution to hold our government accountable. And that's what I got to say about that. That's all I got to say about that, right, Forrest? So we will come back. We'll talk about Section 3, which is, I'm pretty sure, the judicial branch here in the next day or so. And that'll be an interesting one to cover, too. We'll cover that all in one video as well. And we'll just go from there. We'll keep pressing forward. And I am going to be in Everett, Washington on Wednesday speaking at a rally. So if you want to check that out, you can go find that. I think it's called In Solidarity. The In Solidarity rally is what it's called. And I speak at rallies around Washington State and different events. So try and find me, look me up, come and shake my hand, and let's hold our government accountable. All right, that's all I got for tonight. Thanks for watching TNTT, Truth Not Trash with Tim. If you like it, subscribe. Don't forget to share it with your friends, and we'll keep this thing going. God bless you. God bless America, and you guys have a great evening. Good night.